The sun rises over the majestic sandstone buttes of Monument Valley, casting long shadows across the arid landscape. This seemingly timeless place, with its breathtaking beauty and stark isolation, hides a haunting mystery that has puzzled investigators for over a decade. 12 years ago, this land was the last known location of Dr. Emily Carter, a brilliant and passionate herpetologist renowned for her groundbreaking work with reptiles. Emily was the kind of person who could identify a snake from a mile away, whose excitement for her field was contagious. Her dedication to understanding these often misunderstood creatures was matched only by her love for the great outdoors. She was a woman of boundless curiosity, driven by a desire to unveil the secrets of the natural world. Emily grew up in a small town in Oregon, where she spent her childhood exploring the dense woods, cataloging every frog and salamander she could find. Her fascination with reptiles led her to pursue a PhD in herpetology, and she quickly became a respected figure in academic circles. Friends and colleagues describe her as tenacious, intelligent, and deeply empathetic, qualities that endeared her to everyone she met. On the morning of her disappearance, Emily set out alone into Monument Valley for what was supposed to be a routine field study. She was equipped with all the necessary gear, a backpack filled with notebooks, a camera, a GPS device, and enough supplies for a few days in the wilderness. It was a trip she had made countless times before, yet this time she would never return. The last confirmed sighting of Emily was captured by a tourist's camera. In the photograph, she stands atop a ridge, silhouetted against the vast desert sky, her gaze fixed on something only she could see. That image would become the last trace of her known existence. Days turned into weeks, and when Emily failed to return, concern quickly turned into panic. Search teams combed the valley, scouring every inch of the rugged terrain, but there was no sign of her. No trace of her gear, no footprints, nothing. It was as if the earth had swallowed her whole. The initial investigation was marred by missteps and missed opportunities. Local authorities were ill-prepared for such a case, and communication breakdowns hindered the search efforts. Friends and family were left in a state of agonizing uncertainty, clinging to hope even as the odds grew slimmer by the day. Fast forward to 12 years later, two hikers wandering off the beaten path make a chilling discovery. A path not marked on any map leads them to a secluded alcove hidden from view. There, among the rocks, they find something that sets in motion a chain of events that will finally bring answers to Emily's disappearance. The hikers, their voices trembling, place a call to 911. The operator listens intently as they describe what they've found, their words echoing the unsolvable mystery that has haunted Monument Valley for more than a decade. As the call ends, one question hangs in the air. What happened to Dr. Emily Carter? And why did it take 12 long years for the truth to surface? Dr. Emily Carter was more than just a herpetologist. She was a pioneer in her field, driven by a relentless curiosity about the natural world. Her love for reptiles began in her childhood, growing up in the lush, humid forests of the Pacific Northwest. It was there, amid the dense greenery, that she first encountered a garter snake, and from that moment, she was captivated. By the time she reached college, Emily's passion had crystallized into a career path, one that would eventually lead her to the stark, mesmerizing beauty of Monument Valley. Her colleagues described her as a dedicated researcher, someone who could spend hours observing the behavior of a single lizard without losing focus. Her extensive work on reptile migration patterns had not only gained her respect in academic circles, but had also made her a beloved figure among local conservationists. Yet, despite her professional success, she was known to few outside her field. Emily thrived in the quiet solitude of her work, far away from the bustling world. In the days leading up to her disappearance, Emily had been preparing for what she called the most significant study of her career. She had been particularly excited about a rare species of sidewinder rattlesnake rumored to inhabit a remote part of the valley. Her notes, meticulously detailed, hinted at a potential breakthrough in understanding these elusive creatures. It was this prospect that led her to embark on that fateful trip. On the morning she left, Emily was seen by a few passing tourists, her demeanor calm and focused. She had waved casually, a habitual gesture for someone accustomed to the occasional curious gaze. Her destination was a secluded area she had visited before, a place she believed held secrets waiting to be uncovered. But that evening, when she failed to check in with her research assistant, alarm bells began to ring. Initially, there was little concern. After all, Emily was known for losing track of time in the field. But as hours turned into a day, worry set in. Calls went unanswered, and messages remained unread. The search that followed was intense, yet disorganized. Volunteers and local authorities, unfamiliar with the intricacies of the rugged terrain, struggled to coordinate their efforts. Helicopters buzzed overhead, and search dogs were brought in, but the vastness of Monument Valley swallowed their attempts like the shifting sands. Speculation ran rampant. Had she fallen victim to the treacherous landscape, or was there something more sinister at play? Rumors of foul play circulated, but with no evidence they remained just that, rumors. As the days passed, hope dwindled, leaving behind a void that consumed Emily's family and friends. Her parents, devastated, clung to the belief that she would be found, while her colleagues continued to search for answers in her absence. Now, 12 years later, that desperate hope is reignited by the unexpected discovery of the two hikers. Their 911 call, hesitant and filled with disbelief, relays the sight of a weathered backpack, partially buried under rocks, its contents eerily untouched by time. The operator, seasoned yet empathetic, asks for clarification, her voice steady against the rising tension. And as the hikers describe the skeletal remains found near the backpack, a chill descends, the weight of their words heavy with the promise of closure and the burden of truth. The call ends, but the question lingers. What new secrets does Monument Valley hold? And will they finally unravel the mystery of Dr. Emily Carter's disappearance? The dawn of a new investigation brought with it the echoes of the past. As the morning sun stretched its rays over Monument Valley, the discovery of the remains triggered a cascade of events, pulling everyone back to those first 48 hours after Emily's disappearance, an indelible mark on the collective memory of her family and the local community. 12 years ago, the initial call to the local sheriff's office was met with a mixture of urgency and disbelief. Emily Carter wasn't just any visitor. She was a respected herpetologist whose work had earned her accolades. Her disappearance warranted immediate attention, yet the response was marred by a lack of resources and experience with such cases in the vast expanse of the valley. In those critical first hours, key witnesses emerged. A local guide, familiar with Emily's research area, recounted seeing her jeep parked along a dusty trail, her equipment loaded with care. It was a scene he had witnessed before, but something felt off this time. Her vehicle was there, but she was not. The police, however, were quick to dismiss initial concerns. Maybe she just got lost, they suggested, underestimating the complexity of the terrain and the potential dangers lurking within it. This assumption led them to overlook crucial evidence, as they focused their efforts on the most accessible trails rather than the areas Emily was known to explore. Meanwhile, Emily's parents arrived, their faces etched with worry and exhaustion. They pleaded for more resources, more attention, but their cries were lost in the bureaucratic shuffle. The lead investigator, burdened by the weight of procedure, assured them of his commitment, though his words felt hollow as if rehearsed. Emily's colleagues, a close-knit group of researchers, took matters into their own hands, forming search parties and scouring the valley with an intensity born of desperation. They knew her habits, her instincts, and they were convinced she wouldn't have wandered aimlessly. Yet their findings, small as they were, a broken branch here, a footprint there, were dismissed as circumstantial, the threads too fine to weave into a coherent narrative. As the hours turned to days, the momentum of the search waned, falling victim to fatigue and the vastness of the desert. The initial mistakes, misjudged priorities, ignored witness accounts, and a failure to secure a potential crime scene cast long shadows over the investigation. Rumors of foul play began to circulate, whispers of a figure seen lurking near the research site, but with no concrete evidence, they were dismissed as idle talk. Now with the hikers' discovery, those early errors loomed large, their consequences inescapable. The sheriff, now retired but haunted by the case, was called back to consult, his voice thick with regret as he recounted those early missteps. "We thought we had time," he said, a sentiment echoed by many who had been involved. The family, their wounds barely healed, were thrust back into the spotlight, their hope rekindled yet tempered by years of unanswered questions. Emily's mother, her resolve unbroken, spoke to the press, her voice a mix of gratitude and a plea for renewed vigilance. "We need to know what happened to our daughter," she implored, her words resonating with those who had followed the case from the beginning. As the investigation reignited, the stakes were clear. Unravel the truth, no matter how deeply it was buried beneath the sands of Monument Valley. And with each revelation, the question persisted. Who or what had sealed Emily's fate? The sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the parched landscape of Monument Valley. In the dimming light, the sheriff's eyes were fixed on the dusty files sprawled across his kitchen table. The echoes of those first frantic 48 hours played on a loop in his mind, a cacophony of missed opportunities and overlooked details. It was late afternoon when the call came in. Emily, a dedicated herpetologist, had failed to return from her fieldwork. Her colleagues, already in a state of alarm, relayed their concerns to the local authorities, their voices tinged with urgency. The response, however, was sluggish, hampered by the notion that adults occasionally sought solitude in the vastness of the desert. The sheriff, then a younger man with more confidence than experience, dispatched a small team to canvass the area. They began with the basics: interviews with Emily's colleagues and a cursory examination of her campsite. Key witnesses emerged: fellow researchers who had seen her leave that morning, a local guide who noted her meticulous nature, and a tourist who thought they saw a figure lingering near the research site. But as sunlight faded, so did the urgency. The team, convinced she might have lost track of time, resolved to regroup in the morning. Meanwhile, Emily's family was notified, the news delivered with careful detachment. Her mother's voice, cracking with disbelief, still echoed in the sheriff's ears. She wouldn't just disappear, she'd insisted, a statement that resonated with the certainty of a mother who knew her child. Back at the station, crucial missteps began to unfold. Witness statements were recorded, but not cross-verified. The area where Emily was last seen wasn't cordoned off, allowing potential evidence to be trampled by the curious and well-meaning alike. A local rumor, dismissed as hearsay, hinted at a newcomer in town, someone with an interest in Emily's work. Yet, without tangible proof, it was relegated to the growing pile of unsubstantiated claims. As dawn broke over the valley, the search was renewed with vigor, but the delay had taken its toll. Footprints had faded, and the wind had carried away any whispers the desert might have held. The family arrived, a united front of hope and heartache, their presence a constant reminder of the stakes at hand. In those critical first hours, the seeds of doubt were sown. The sheriff, now weathered by time and regret, knew that each misjudgment had only widened the chasm between Emily and those determined to find her. The discovery by the hikers 12 years later had reopened wounds, but it also offered a chance for redemption, a possibility to rewrite the narrative that had long seemed set in stone. As the clock ticked forward, the sheriff resolved to face the past, to unravel the tangled web of errors and oversights. The hikers' find was a beacon, a signpost pointing toward truths long buried. But would it be enough to illuminate the path to justice? With each passing moment, the question loomed larger. Had the window of opportunity closed, or was there still time to bring Emily home? The sheriff stood in the dim morning light, the desolate beauty of Monument Valley stretching out before him like a vast silent testament to the past. The first 48 hours after Emily's disappearance had been a whirlwind of half-measures and misplaced priorities. Now, as he reflected on those critical moments, the weight of what was lost pressed heavily on his shoulders. In those early hours, the search had been chaotic. Volunteers from the town, driven by a sense of community and urgency, had scoured the area without clear direction. Emily's research camp, a modest assembly of equipment and personal effects, had been picked over without any systematic approach. The sheriff recalled how easily they had dismissed the scattered papers and overturned equipment, assuming it was the result of desert winds rather than a struggle. Witnesses had come forward, each with their own fragment of the story. A local rancher had seen Emily the morning of her disappearance, her figure a solitary silhouette against the rising sun. Another claimed to have heard raised voices echoing off the canyon walls, but the sheriff, overwhelmed by the sheer volume of information, had failed to connect the dots or press for more clarity. Emily's family, having arrived with the desperate hope of finding their daughter, had been met with a wall of procedural inadequacy. Her mother's eyes, red from tears and sleepless nights, had searched the faces of the search party for assurance that never came. Instead, they found only the echo of their own fears mirrored back at them. The sheriff remembered the moment he had realized the severity of their mistakes. It was a quiet afternoon, the sun high and relentless, when he had noticed the tracks, undisturbed footprints leading away from Emily's camp. They were largely ignored, deemed unimportant amidst the larger search area, but now, in retrospect, he knew they might have been the only tangible link to her whereabouts. A local rumor persisted, swirling through the town like a persistent breeze. An unfamiliar face seen frequenting the diner, someone who asked too many questions about Emily and her work. The sheriff, under pressure and short on resources, had dismissed it as idle gossip. Yet now it seemed less like fiction and more like a missed opportunity. As the sun climbed higher, those first 48 hours became a blur of missed connections and unheeded warnings. Each oversight had allowed the trail to grow colder, the hope of finding Emily dimming with the setting sun. But as the sheriff stood resolute in the present, the hiker's discovery, a piece of Emily's journal, weathered but still legible, offered a glimmer of hope. There was renewed determination, driven not just by duty, but by a personal need for redemption. The sheriff knew that the answers lay buried beneath years of neglect and silence. As he prepared to revisit the past, a single question echoed in his mind. Could the fragments of a journal, found after all these years, be the key to unraveling the truth of what happened to Emily? The investigation was about to take a turn. The sheriff was resolved to follow the trail wherever it might lead, even if it meant confronting the ghosts of his own failures. As the sheriff clutched the weathered journal, pages fluttering in the gentle breeze, determination stitched his brow. It was a Tuesday morning when he gathered his deputies in the cramped, musty station. They circled the table, eyes scanning the faded ink of Emily's words. Her entries, though fragmented, painted a vivid picture of her final days, her excitement about a promising discovery, her musings about the solitude of the desert, and most intriguingly, a mention of a stranger she referred to only as the observer. The sheriff's voice, gravelly with the weight of years, broke the silence. They had to re-examine every detail, every whisper that had been dismissed. The mention of the observer reignited memories of the rumor, the stranger at the diner, the questions about Emily's research. They needed to track him down, to see if his intentions were as benign as he claimed. But the town was small and memories faded quickly. The sheriff and his deputies set about their task, revisiting the diner where the stranger had been seen. The waitress, a woman with lines of fatigue etched into her face, remembered him. A drifter, she said, with an accent that hinted he wasn't from around these parts. He'd lingered over coffee, asking about local wildlife, about Emily. Yet, as they probed deeper, the tale grew muddled. Some recalled seeing him again, weeks after Emily vanished. Others couldn't be sure. The sheriff felt the familiar frustration of chasing shadows, rumors tangled with truths, elusive and slippery. The investigation stalled. Leads dried up as quickly as rain in the desert, leaving only dust and empty questions. And as the weeks turned into months, hope began to wane. Emily's name slipped from conversations, her disappearance becoming just another story whispered among locals who'd long since moved on. But for the sheriff, the guilt gnawed at him. He drove out to the vast expanse of Monument Valley, standing alone where Emily's camp once stood. The landscape was unyielding, indifferent to the human drama that played out against its backdrop. It was here, amidst the towering red rocks, that he vowed not to let Emily's story fade into oblivion. Back in town, whispers persisted, rumors of a lover's quarrel, of Emily's supposed secret life. None of it aligned with the woman the sheriff had come to know through her journal, yet in the absence of truth, speculation thrived. The sheriff felt the weight of every unresolved case he'd ever worked, the burden of justice denied. Then came the winter, bringing its own kind of silence. Snow covered the footprints of the past, and the case, once vibrant with urgency, settled into the cold embrace of unsolved mysteries. Yet beneath the surface, the sheriff's resolve smoldered, waiting for the chance, the break, that would turn rumors into revelations. As the winds whipped through the valley, carrying echoes of the past, the sheriff knew this was merely a pause, a breath before the storm. Emily's story was far from over. The journal was a beginning, not an end, and somewhere out there was the piece of the puzzle that would turn the tide. The question was, how long before it surfaced? The sheriff stood at the edge of the valley, the wind biting at his skin, determined to find the truth buried beneath the sands of time. He returned to town with a renewed sense of purpose, but the landscape of the investigation had shifted. The once bustling command post had dwindled to a skeleton crew, and the public's interest had waned. The whispers persisted, though, growing louder in the absence of facts. In the small town that bordered Monument Valley, theories had taken root. Some believed Emily had staged her own disappearance, seeking a new life far from the academic pressures that shadowed her every move. Others whispered about a mysterious man seen in her company, a shadowy figure whose existence was as uncertain as his intentions. The sheriff's attention turned to this supposed suitor, a local ranch hand named Jake, who had been seen with Emily on more than one occasion. Gossip painted him as a rough-around-the-edges type, a drifter with a penchant for trouble. The sheriff found Jake in a dimly lit bar, nursing a drink and avoiding eye contact with the regulars. Their conversation unfolded like a dance, the sheriff probing for inconsistencies, while Jake deflected with well-rehearsed ease. He admitted to knowing Emily, even to sharing a few drinks with her, but he insisted that their relationship was nothing more than a fleeting friendship. He was quick to point out that he had an alibi for the night of Emily's disappearance, a poker game with friends, each one willing to vouch for his presence. Despite Jake's assurances, the sheriff couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The ranch hand's demeanor was a curious mix of confidence and evasiveness, his eyes darting to the door as if contemplating escape. Yet without concrete evidence, the sheriff's hands were tied. Jake remained a person of interest but not a solid suspect. As the weeks dragged on, the investigation hit a wall. The initial flurry of tips and sightings dwindled to nothing, and the case files grew cold. The sheriff's office was inundated with other responsibilities, and resources were stretched thin. Emily's disappearance became a ghost haunting the periphery of their efforts, a chilling reminder of the unsolved. Rumors continued to swirl, each more outlandish than the last. There were tales of secret societies and hidden caves, of treasure maps and ancient curses. The sheriff knew better than to put stock in such fantasies, but he understood their allure, a way for the community to make sense of the senseless. Meanwhile, Emily's family clung to hope with a tenacity that defied the odds. They organized search parties, distributed flyers, and maintained a hotline for tips. Their resolve was a beacon in the darkness, yet even their spirits were tested as seasons changed and the valley remained silent. The sheriff spent countless hours poring over Emily's journal, searching for overlooked clues or hidden meanings. Her words were a tapestry of passion and curiosity, a testament to her life's work, but they offered little insight into her fate. As the chill of winter receded, the sheriff found himself back at the beginning, staring out at the expanse of Monument Valley. Somewhere in its vastness lay the truth of what happened to Emily, but it remained elusive, a whisper in the wind. The sheriff knew this was simply another chapter in the saga, a lull before the next revelation. He would wait, he would search, and when the time came, he would be ready. For the story of Emily's disappearance was not over, and in the heart of the valley, secrets waited to be unearthed. As the sheriff gazed over the sprawling landscape of Monument Valley, a sense of frustration gnawed at him. The case had reached a disheartening standstill. Emily's inexplicable disappearance had become an enigmatic puzzle, each piece more elusive than the last. The community, once buzzing with concern and eager to assist, now found itself divided by a veil of suspicion and gossip. In small towns, rumors spread like wildfire, and Emily's case was no different. Theories abounded, each more speculative than the last. Some whispered about a local drifter, a man named Silas, who had been seen wandering the outskirts of the valley around the time Emily vanished. His unkempt appearance and solitary lifestyle made him an easy target for suspicion. Yet, despite the gossip, there was no evidence linking him to the crime. Others cast a wary eye on Emily's colleague, Dr. Martin. The two had been working closely on a project, and some speculated that professional jealousy or a personal falling out might have led to foul play. But again, there was no concrete evidence, just the murmur of speculation. The sheriff followed each lead, each whisper, hoping to find a thread that would unravel the mystery. But every path led to a dead end, and the frustration grew. With each passing day, the trail grew colder, and Emily's name slipped from the lips of those not directly touched by her absence. Meanwhile, Emily's family remained steadfast. Her parents, stalwart in their belief that she would be found, continued their relentless search. They organized vigils and community meetings, reminding everyone that Emily was not just a headline, but a beloved daughter, sister, and friend. In the sheriff's office, the case files began to collect dust. Other cases demanded attention, and resources were finite. But the sheriff couldn't shake the feeling that they were missing something crucial, some overlooked detail that could break the case wide open. The community's interest waned, but the sheriff's determination did not. He spent evenings revisiting the evidence, retracing Emily's steps, sifting through her research with a fine-toothed comb. He spoke with her colleagues, her friends, anyone who might hold a glimmer of insight. Yet, despite his efforts, the valley remained silent, its secrets buried beneath layers of red rock and time. As spring gave way to summer, hope flickered tenuously in the heat, and the sheriff felt the weight of time pressing in. But he knew that the story was far from over. Somewhere hidden within the shadows of the valley lay the truth, and when it finally emerged, it would cast a light on the dark corners of Monument Valley, revealing the secrets it had held for so long. There was no telling when the breakthrough would come, but the sheriff was ready. For Emily's story was not just a case, it was a promise, a commitment to uncover the truth, no matter how deep it was buried. In the heart of the valley, the past waited to be unearthed, waiting for the moment when the pieces would finally fall into place. The years slipped by like sand through fingers, relentless and indifferent. Emily's parents refused to let their daughter's memory fade, even as the world seemed to move on without her. Each anniversary of her disappearance marked a renewed commitment to their private investigation, a stubborn defiance against the creeping apathy that threatened to swallow her story whole. Emily's mother spent her days poring over old photos, studying every detail as if they might offer some hidden clue. Her father mapped out every known detail of Emily's last expedition, creating a sprawling web of connections and theories that covered the walls of their home. It became their life's work, an obsession that grew with each passing year. The community, once galvanized by Emily's story, gradually turned the page. New families moved into the neighborhood, unaware of the tragedy that had once gripped their town. The vigils dwindled in size until they were intimate gatherings of the most resolute, those who refused to let go. Yet, even in the quiet, a flicker of hope remained. Every so often, a whisper of new information would reach Emily's family, a potential sighting or a story from a traveler passing through the valley. Each lead was pursued with fervor, only to end in heartbreak and frustration. But rather than dissuade them, these dead ends only fueled their resolve. Meanwhile, the sheriff, now nearing retirement, found himself haunted by the case. He'd grown a few more grey hairs since Emily's disappearance, and the burden of unanswered questions weighed heavily on him. The valley, with its silent, watchful presence, was a constant reminder of his failure to find her. In quiet moments he revisited the case files, seeking solace in the familiar pages. He ran his fingers over the maps, traced routes she might have taken, and replayed interviews in his mind. It was as if Emily's voice echoed in the stillness, urging him not to give up. Despite the long silence, Emily's story continued to breathe in the hearts of those who loved her. Her brother, now a young man, had grown up in the shadow of her absence. He channeled his grief into action, studying criminal justice with the hope of one day finding answers for his sister and others like her. As the years marched on, the world around them evolved. Technology advanced, offering new tools and methods that Emily's family could have only dreamed of when she first disappeared. Her brother, keenly aware of these developments, began exploring avenues that might bring fresh insight into the case. Yet, even with these advancements, the vast expanse of Monument Valley seemed to mock their efforts, its secrets held with a stubborn silence. But they knew that all it would take was one moment of clarity, one overlooked detail to shatter the years of quiet and bring Emily's story back into the light. And so they waited, tethered to hope, their lives entwined with the mystery of what had happened on that fateful day. They believed against all odds that the truth was out there just waiting to be uncovered. And when it finally emerged, it would be as though the valley itself had exhaled, releasing the secrets it had kept for far too long. In the quiet corners of their home, Emily's parents kept a shrine of sorts, a small table adorned with photos, mementos, and candles that flickered in the twilight hours. It was a sacred space, a physical manifestation of their enduring hope and relentless love. Her mother, often found there in the early mornings, whispered silent prayers, her heart heavy with the weight of years lost. Emily's father, ever the stoic figure, threw himself into work, yet each day felt like a shadow of the one before. The world around them had moved on. Monument Valley, with its timeless majesty, remained a popular destination, its beauty unmarred by the tragedy it had witnessed. Visitors came and went, oblivious to the sorrow that lingered in the air for those who remembered. Emily's brother, now a detective in his own right, had become a beacon of resilience. He had dedicated his career to helping families like his, guided by the belief that justice, however delayed, was worth pursuing. His colleagues, aware of his personal connection to the unsolved case, admired his tenacity and often leaned on him for insights that only someone with such a personal stake could provide. But even his burgeoning career could not fill the void left by Emily's absence. He frequently returned to Monument Valley, walking the trails she once roamed, hoping to stumble upon something, anything, that might crack open the silence. His visits became less frequent over time, yet each one felt like a pilgrimage, a journey to reconnect with his sister's spirit. The community, meanwhile, had settled into a comfortable numbness. New families had moved in, their children growing up without the knowledge of the valley's haunting past. Local law enforcement, stretched thin and overwhelmed with new cases, relegated Emily's disappearance to the archives, a ghost in their filing cabinets. Yet, whispers of Emily's story persisted. Occasionally, a news outlet would revisit the case, reigniting public interest for a brief moment. But as quickly as the curiosity flared, it faded, swallowed by the next big headline. Emily's family learned to navigate these cycles, bracing themselves for the surge of attention followed by the inevitable retreat into obscurity. It was during one of these quiet periods that Emily's brother received a call from an old college friend, now a renowned forensic scientist. With a tone of cautious optimism, the friend spoke of recent advancements in DNA technology, breakthroughs that might provide answers in cold cases long thought impossible to solve. The conversation sparked a renewed sense of purpose. Could this be the moment they had waited for? Could the silent years finally give way to a voice, a revelation that would set the valley's secrets free? Emily's brother felt the familiar tug of hope, a fragile thread that had held them together through the darkest times. As he hung up the phone, his mind raced with possibilities. The years of silence had not been in vain. They had prepared him for this moment, for the chance to finally bring Emily home. He knew the path ahead would not be easy, but he was ready, as was his family, to face whatever truths lay hidden beneath the surface. And so, with a renewed determination, he set out to uncover the details that could change everything. As the valley stood watch, its secrets simmering just beneath the surface, the stage was set for a breakthrough that would forever alter the fabric of their lives. Emily's brother found himself standing at the precipice of discovery, his heart a mix of trepidation and hope. The call had been a lifeline in a sea of despair, a whisper of promise that perhaps, after all these years, the truth could finally be within reach. The family, though battered by time and sorrow, rallied behind him, their collective resolve a testament to their unyielding love for Emily. They met at their parents' home, a place unchanged since the day she vanished, where the walls whispered memories of laughter and warmth that now felt like echoes from another life. The dining table was strewn with old photographs, clippings from newspapers, and the scant police reports they had managed to acquire over the years. Each piece of paper, each faded image, was a fragment of a puzzle they had long sought to complete. As they pored over the details, Emily's brother shared the news of the forensic breakthrough, igniting a flicker of hope in their weary eyes. But the years had taught them caution. Hope was a double-edged sword, capable of sustaining them, yet equally adept at inflicting fresh wounds. They had seen too many false dawns, heard too many empty promises. This time, however, felt different. The forensic world had evolved, and perhaps now it held the key to unraveling the mystery that had become an inextricable part of their lives. Emily's parents, once vibrant and full of life, had aged prematurely under the weight of uncertainty. Their faces, etched with lines of grief and resilience, betrayed the passage of time, yet their spirits remained unbroken. Her father, a man of few words, had channeled his anguish into action, becoming an amateur sleuth in his own right, sifting through every lead, every rumor, with meticulous care. The community, once gripped by the tragedy, had slowly moved on, their lives weaving new stories over the fabric of the past. Time had dulled the collective memory, transforming Emily's disappearance into a cautionary tale told around campfires, a ghost story to thrill and unsettle. Yet for her family, time had not healed. It had merely deepened the wound. Emily's brother knew that the first step was reaching out to the forensic scientist, whose voice had carried both the weight of expertise and the lightness of hope. He dialed the number, his fingers trembling slightly, and arranged a meeting to discuss what could be done, what might finally bring clarity to the enigma that had defined their lives. As days turned to weeks, the family awaited the meeting with a mix of anxiety and anticipation. They knew that this could be the beginning of the end, or merely another chapter in their long, unending quest for truth. But for now, they clung to the possibility of answers, of justice, and of finally bringing Emily home. The valley, silent and immutable, remained a guardian of its secrets, its red rocks and sweeping vistas, a testament to nature's indifference to human sorrow. Yet somewhere within its vastness, the truth lay buried, waiting to be unearthed. And as the family braced themselves for what lay ahead, they knew that this chance, this moment, was a precious gift, their last best hope to finally solve the mystery of their beloved Emily. The phone buzzed quietly on the table, vibrating against the polished wood like a distant tremor. It was Emily's brother who picked it up, his heart pounding with a mix of fear and anticipation. The voice on the other end was steady, confident and reassuring. "We've reviewed the case files you sent over," the forensic scientist began, their tone measured yet infused with the promise of a new beginning. "There's a lot here, but I believe there are some angles we can explore further. I'd like to start with the soil samples from the area she was last seen." Emily's brother nodded, though the scientist couldn't see him. It was a small step forward, a glimmer in the seemingly endless darkness that had enveloped their lives. The call ended with a promise of a more detailed discussion in person, a meeting set for the following week. As the family waited for that day, life continued its relentless march forward. Days turned into weeks and the seasons changed, painting the landscape with a palette of new colors. The outside world, with its mundane and extraordinary events, seemed to move at a pace they could no longer comprehend. For them, time was marked by anniversaries of Emily's disappearance, each one a painful reminder of what had been lost. In the quiet moments, when the house was still and the only sound was the wind rustling through the trees, Emily's mother would sit by the window, lost in thoughts of what could have been. Her mind wandered through a tapestry of memories, each one vivid yet ephemeral, like a dream slipping through the fingers upon waking. She wondered how much of Emily she still remembered, and how much had been worn away by time. The community, once bound together by the tragedy, had slowly unraveled, its threads pulled apart by the demands of daily life. The search parties had long since dispersed, their members moving on to other causes, other lives. New families had moved into town, unaware of the shadow that had once loomed so large. Yet there were those who still whispered Emily's name, her story living on in the shared consciousness of those who remembered. The old cafe on Main Street, its walls lined with photographs and newspaper clippings, stood as a shrine to a time when hope had fueled their every action. The owner, a friend of the family, kept a candle burning in the window, a silent vigil for the girl who never returned. Despite the silence, the family's determination never wavered. Emily's father, the amateur sleuth, continued his solitary quest for answers, his study filled with maps, notes, and theories. It was his private war against the unknown, a battle fought with resolve and love. And then, just as hope seemed to flicker and fade, a letter arrived. It was postmarked from a small town several states away, the handwriting unfamiliar. Inside, a single line: "I think I know what happened to Emily." This unexpected message, a beacon in their long night, promised a new chapter in their search. As they gathered around the letter, reading and rereading the words, a new resolve took root. The silence was breaking, and with it came the possibility of finally unearthing the truth. The letter sat on the table like a fragile promise, its single sentence a thread pulling them back from the abyss. Emily's father, his hands trembling, looked at his wife and then back at the letter. It was a lifeline, a glimmer in the darkness that had enveloped them for so long. In the days that followed, the family contacted the authorities, their renewed hope intertwined with caution. The local police department, stretched thin and all too familiar with dashed hopes, needed convincing. But the persistence of a family who refused to forget was a powerful force. Enter Detective Sarah McKenna, a new face in the department, transferred from a bustling city precinct. Her reputation for resolving cold cases preceded her, a fact not lost on Emily's father during their first meeting. She listened intently, eyes sharp with interest and empathy, as he recounted the story that had become his life's mission. Detective McKenna, intrigued by the letter and the family's unwavering faith, decided to reopen the case. There was something about the mystery, about the way the community had held on to Emily's memory, that stirred her instincts. She was known for her tenacity, for seeing connections where others saw none. Her first step was to delve into the evidence, much of it now gathering dust in the precinct's cold case archives. Among the files, she found a promising lead, an old, untested piece of fabric, its edges frayed, stained with what might have been blood. It had been overlooked, filed away in the chaos of the initial investigation. With the advent of new forensic technology, particularly genetic genealogy, Detective McKenna saw an opportunity. It was a method that had recently been making headlines, solving cases thought unsolvable. The fabric was sent to a specialized lab, where the potential for extracting DNA material far exceeded what had been possible 12 years ago. As the days turned into weeks, each one a test of patience, the family clung to the hope that science might succeed where human memory had failed. Detective McKenna kept them informed, her updates a lifeline. They learned the process was meticulous, requiring both precision and time. And then, the call came. The lab had found something, a partial DNA profile. Detective McKenna felt a surge of adrenaline. It wasn't enough to make an arrest, but it was a start. The profile was entered into a database, a digital net cast wide in the hopes of catching a match. The family, buoyed by this new development, found themselves in a limbo of cautious optimism. It was a tangible step forward, a crack in the wall of silence that had surrounded Emily's disappearance. As they waited, the community began to stir. Rumors of the reopened case spread, and with them whispers of hope. The cafe on Main Street saw a resurgence of visitors, each one contributing to the collective memory of Emily. But as the sun set on yet another day, the question remained: would the DNA profile lead them to the truth, or was it merely another thread in a tapestry of unanswered questions? In the quiet of their home, Emily's parents sat by the window, the letter still on the table, a reminder of the journey they had undertaken and the new path now unfolding before them. The silence was breaking, and with it came the promise of answers long overdue. As the moonlight cast a gentle glow over the quiet town, Detective McKenna found herself poring over the case files once more. The DNA profile was a beacon, albeit a faint one, in the murky waters of a case gone cold. Her mind spun with possibilities, each more tantalizing than the last. The following morning, the town awoke to whispers of a new lead, a spark of hope rippling through the community. Yet beneath the surface, an undercurrent of skepticism lingered. Memories of past disappointment still fresh in many minds. Detective McKenna met with the forensic team, their faces a mix of excitement and trepidation. The partial DNA profile had been uploaded to the national database, a digital lighthouse scanning the vast ocean of genetic data. It was only a matter of time before they would know if it had found a match. Days blended into nights, each one stretching longer than the last. Yet just when hope threatened to falter, an alert came through. A familial match, distant but undeniable. The name associated with the DNA was one that had never appeared in the original investigation. It belonged to a man named Oliver Grant, a name unknown to Emily's family and most of the town. Detective McKenna wasted no time diving into the history of Oliver Grant. His life was a tapestry of shadows, marked by brief stints in various towns, leaving little trace behind. But there was one connection that stood out, a connection to Monument Valley. It was a tenuous link, yet it was more than they had ever had. McKenna reached out to local authorities in the places Oliver had lived, piecing together a puzzle that had long gone unsolved. Each conversation, each snippet of information, added depth to the man they were now seeking. Meanwhile, Emily's family found themselves torn between hope and fear. Could this be the breakthrough they had longed for? Or was it another cruel twist in their unending saga? They clung tighter to each other, finding strength in shared memories and the promise of closure. As Detective McKenna delved deeper, a pattern began to emerge. Oliver Grant's movements aligned suspiciously with several unsolved cases, each one a chilling echo of Emily's disappearance. The threads were connecting, forming a picture that grew clearer by the day. But as they edged closer to the truth, questions loomed large. Who was Oliver Grant, really? And what secrets lay buried in the sands of Monument Valley? The answers were tantalizingly close, yet just out of reach. With each passing day, the urgency of the investigation grew. Detective McKenna knew they were on the brink of something significant. But in the shadows, doubt lingered. Could Oliver Grant be the key to unraveling the mystery, or was he merely a mirage in the desert of their hopes? As the sun set once more, painting the sky in hues of orange and red, the town held its breath, the weight of anticipation heavy in the air. The silence that had long shrouded Emily's disappearance was finally breaking, and with it, the promise of long-awaited answers drew near. Detective McKenna stood at the threshold of revelation, the weight of her discoveries pressing heavily on her shoulders. The small office was dimly lit, the hum of the computer the only sound as she pored over the notes, photographs, and maps that cluttered her desk. Each piece of evidence was a whisper from the past, urging her forward. In the midst of her contemplation, an unexpected call came in, a voice she had not heard before, yet one that carried an air of authority and urgency. It was Detective Alan Shaw, a seasoned investigator with a reputation for solving the unsolvable. He had been following the case from a distance, intrigued by the complexity and the potential for a breakthrough. Shaw had recently returned from a conference on forensic advancements and was eager to discuss a new technology that could change everything: genetic genealogy. McKenna listened intently as Shaw outlined how this cutting-edge technique had cracked numerous cold cases, using DNA from public databases to trace familial connections. It was a glimmer of hope, a beacon in the murky depths of the investigation. Their conversation ignited a spark in McKenna. She knew they needed to re-examine the evidence with this new tool. The DNA taken from the scene where Emily had last been seen, long considered too degraded or inconclusive, now held new promise of revealing its secrets. If they could find a match, even a distant relative, it could lead them to Oliver Grant or someone connected to him. The decision was made. The old samples, carefully preserved, were sent to the lab, the anticipation palpable. Days turned into weeks as they awaited the results, each moment stretching into eternity for Emily's family. They clung to this new development, the possibility of closure a lifeline in their sea of grief. Then, just as hope seemed to wane, McKenna received a call from the lab. The voice on the other end was tinged with excitement and disbelief. They had found a match, a distant cousin living in a small town on the outskirts of Monument Valley. The link was tenuous, but it was the first tangible lead they had in years. McKenna and Shaw wasted no time. They traveled to the town, their hearts pounding with anticipation. The journey was filled with silent reflection, each detective lost in thoughts of what this could mean for the case, for Emily's family, and for the man they believed responsible. As they approached the modest home of the cousin, the air was thick with tension. This meeting could unravel the mystery or add another layer to the enigma. Would this familial link reveal the whereabouts of Oliver Grant, or would it lead them down another path entirely? The door opened, and they were greeted by a middle-aged woman whose eyes mirrored their own mix of hope and trepidation. She invited them in, her voice steady yet curious. As they sat down to talk, the detectives knew that the next words spoken could shift the course of their investigation and finally bring Emily's story into the light of truth. What secrets would this connection unveil? And would it be enough to finally bring them face to face with the man who had haunted their every step? As the conversation began, the answers seemed closer than ever, shrouded in the promise of revelation. The room was quiet, save for the ticking of an old clock on the mantelpiece. McKenna leaned forward, his voice steady but gentle. "We appreciate you meeting with us. We are looking into a case that has been open for over a decade, and we recently found a potential familial connection to someone in your family tree." The woman's eyes flickered with recognition, her hands clasping tighter as she nodded. "Yes, I heard about Emily's case. It's been in the news again," she said softly, a hint of sorrow in her voice. Shaw shifted in her seat, her gaze earnest. "Our records show you have a relative, a distant one, who may have lived or worked in the area around the time of Emily's disappearance. We're hoping you might have some information." The woman hesitated, her brow furrowing as she searched her memory. "I think you're referring to Oliver Grant. He was my father's cousin. We weren't close, but I remember him coming around every few years." McKenna and Shaw exchanged a glance, feeling the air crackle with a new intensity. McKenna pressed on, his voice barely above a whisper. "Do you know where he is now?" She shook her head, a trace of regret in her eyes. "Last I heard, he moved to a secluded cabin. He always preferred solitude, and after his wife passed, he just slipped away." She paused as if weighing her next words. "There were rumors, though, whispers of strange behavior, disappearing for days, but I never thought much of it." The detectives' minds raced, the pieces beginning to form a coherent picture. Shaw leaned forward, her curiosity piqued. "Do you know where this cabin might be?" The woman nodded slowly. "I can show you on a map. It's deep in the valley, off the beaten path. Hard to find if you don't know what you're looking for." As she fetched a worn map from a drawer, McKenna felt a surge of cautious optimism. This was more than they dared hope for, a tangible lead pointing them towards Oliver Grant's last known whereabouts. Back at headquarters, the detectives laid out their findings. The map, annotated with the woman's directions, was spread across the table like a treasure map, leading to long-buried secrets. They worked late into the night, piecing together Oliver's possible movements and connections to Emily. The breakthrough came when they cross-referenced Oliver's known locations with sightings and reports from the time of Emily's disappearance. A pattern emerged, a web of connections that placed him perilously close to the last place Emily was seen. The excitement was tempered with the gravity of their discovery. They were nearing the end of a journey, fraught with heartache and frustration, yet the path ahead was still shrouded in uncertainty. As dawn broke, McKenna and Shaw prepared to set out for the cabin, the weight of their mission pressing upon them. Would Oliver Grant hold the answers they sought? Or would he be another phantom in a case that refused to be solved? The door closed behind them, the morning light casting long shadows on the map. The valley awaited, its secrets hidden in the folds of its ancient landscape. But for the first time in years, the detectives felt the pull of resolution, drawing them ever closer to the truth. The sun rose over Monument Valley, casting an ethereal glow across the rugged landscape as McKenna and Shaw embarked on their journey. The drive was silent, each detective lost in thought, the gravity of their mission palpable between them. They navigated the winding paths with the map as their guide, tracing the lines that led them deeper into the valley's heart. "Do you think this is it?" Shaw finally broke the silence, her voice tinged with both hope and apprehension. "At this point, it's the best lead we have," McKenna replied, gripping the steering wheel as the dirt road turned to gravel. "If Oliver Grant is connected to Emily's disappearance, we're about to find out." The cabin came into view, nestled among the towering red rocks, almost camouflaged by its weathered wooden exterior. It looked untouched by time, as if the world had forgotten it existed. The detectives approached cautiously, the crunch of gravel underfoot the only sound breaking the stillness. Inside, the cabin was sparse but meticulously organized. A scientist's retreat, thought Shaw, noting the stacks of books and neatly labeled jars. But it was the desk that caught their attention, particularly a series of notebooks lined up like soldiers, each bearing the meticulous handwriting of Oliver Grant. McKenna opened the first notebook, scanning the pages filled with scientific observations and personal musings. It wasn't until he reached the third notebook that he found something startling: entries detailing Emily's visits, her interest in his work, and her eventual disappearance. "Listen to this," McKenna said, reading aloud. "Emily seemed restless today. She asked more questions about the caves. I worry she's too curious for her own good." Shaw leaned closer, her eyes widening. He was documenting her, but what does he mean by too curious? They continued to read, piecing together the narrative of their interactions. It became clear that Emily had stumbled upon something significant, something she wasn't supposed to see. The final entry was chilling. "She knows I have to do something before she tells anyone." A shiver ran down Shaw's spine. He was afraid of what she knew. But what did she discover? As they mulled over the implications, McKenna noticed a hidden compartment beneath the desk, barely visible unless you knew where to look. He pried it open to reveal a small, dusty box. Inside lay a collection of photographs, each one more disturbing than the last. Emily in various states of distress, always in the same location, a dark, cavernous space that seemed to stretch endlessly. "This is it, Shaw. She found something. And Oliver." He made sure she couldn't talk. But the breakthrough didn't end there. As they examined the photos, Shaw noticed something familiar in the background, a distinctive rock formation unique to a certain area of the valley. It was a place they hadn't considered before, a place that might hold the final pieces of the puzzle. "We need to get there," Shaw said, urgency in her voice. "There could be evidence, something that ties Oliver to her disappearance." As they rushed back to their vehicle, the weight of their discovery settled heavily upon them. They were closing in on the truth, a truth that had eluded everyone for over a decade. But with every revelation came a new question, a question they hoped to answer before the day was through. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time they felt the path to justice unfurling before them, leading them ever closer to the end of this harrowing mystery. As they sped toward the rock formation, the sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows across the arid landscape. Shaw and McKenna were silent, each lost in their thoughts, the gravity of their discovery pressing heavily upon them. The vehicle bounced along the uneven terrain, dust swirling in its wake. Shaw broke the silence, her voice steady but tense. "If those photos were taken where I think they were, we might find more than just evidence. We might find Emily's final resting place." McKenna nodded, his grip on the steering wheel tightening. "We need to be thorough. If Oliver left anything behind, we can't afford to miss it." As they arrived at the site, the rock formation loomed before them, its jagged edges cutting into the horizon. They climbed out of the vehicle, their eyes scanning the landscape. The area was eerily silent, the only sound the faint rustling of the wind through the sparse vegetation. Shaw pointed to a narrow opening in the rock face. "That looks like the entrance to a cave. It matches the background in the photos." They approached cautiously, their flashlights cutting through the darkness as they entered. The air inside was cool and damp, the walls glistening with mineral deposits. As they ventured deeper, the cave widened into a cavernous space, the same one from the photographs. McKenna's flashlight beam caught something on the ground. He knelt down, brushing away the dirt to reveal a tarnished locket. Inside was a faded photograph of Emily, smiling, a keepsake from a life cut tragically short. Shaw's heart ached at the sight, but they pressed on, moving slowly, methodically. In the far corner of the cavern, McKenna found a small metal box, its lid slightly ajar. Inside were more photographs, a journal and a map, Oliver's twisted documentation of his actions. The journal was the key. It detailed not only Emily's discovery, but also Oliver's descent into paranoia and his plans to ensure her silence. Each entry was a chilling glimpse into a mind unraveling, driven by fear and obsession. Shaw's voice was barely a whisper. "This is it, McKenna. This is what we've been looking for." The map was marked with locations Emily had visited, places she had suspected were significant, but one location was circled repeatedly, annotated with cryptic notes. It was a spot deep within the valley, far from where they stood. McKenna studied the map, his pulse quickening. This could be where he took her, where he hid everything. They exchanged a grim look, the weight of the truth settling over them. They had uncovered a dark secret, one that had remained hidden for over a decade. But now, finally, they were on the brink of exposing the killer, the person who had stolen Emily's life and haunted their own. As they retraced their steps to the cave entrance, Shaw felt a sense of resolve wash over her. The pieces were finally coming together, the path to justice clearer than ever before. The next move was crucial, and they couldn't afford any mistakes. "We need to get this evidence to the authorities," McKenna said, determination in his voice. "And then we find Oliver." They hurried back to their vehicle, the sun now dipping below the horizon, casting the valley in shadows. The journey was far from over, but they were closer than ever to bringing Emily's story to light and ensuring that her voice, silenced for so long, would finally be heard. As they drove through the twilight, the weight of their discovery pressed heavily on McKenna and Shaw. The landscape around them seemed to shift and warp in the fading light, each shadow a potential harbinger of the truth they were about to unveil. The evidence they carried felt like a living thing between them, the journal's pages whispering secrets of a life stolen and a truth buried. Their minds raced with the implications of their find. Oliver, the unassuming face of the local wildlife preservation group, a man known for his dedication to preserving the delicate ecosystems of Monument Valley, was the last person anyone would suspect. In the community, Oliver was a respected figure, often seen leading educational tours, his voice animated with passion for the land and its creatures. His public persona was impeccable, the very image of a man devoted to life in all its forms. Yet beneath that veneer lay a darkness they had only begun to comprehend. Arriving at the sheriff's office, the duo felt the cold finality of their mission settling in. They had enough to prompt an arrest, to pull Oliver from the shadows he had hidden in for over a decade. The journal, the photographs, and the map were damning. They were the breadcrumbs leading straight to the monster that had worn a human face. Inside, the sheriff listened intently, his expression a mix of disbelief and grim understanding as McKenna and Shaw laid out the evidence. Each piece fit together with chilling clarity, forming a narrative of obsession and betrayal that had played out beneath the surface of their quiet community. "We've got no time to waste," the sheriff said, urgency sharpening his words. "I want a team ready to move by dawn. Oliver won't see this coming." As night settled over the valley, the town buzzed with covert activity. Officers assembled, their expressions steely with determination. They moved quickly, quietly, knowing that any delay could mean Oliver slipping through their fingers. The shock of the revelation added a tense electricity to the air, charging every movement with purpose. In the pre-dawn darkness, they approached Oliver's modest home, nestled on the outskirts of town. Its exterior was unassuming, the kind of place that spoke of a simple life, of a man who lived close to the land he claimed to love. But now, as they stood ready, it took on a sinister aspect, a facade that hid a heart of darkness. The arrest was swift, the clink of handcuffs echoing in the stillness. Oliver's face, usually composed and benign, twisted into a mask of shock and rage as he was led away. The truth of his actions finally catching up with him. He muttered denials, his voice rising in desperation, but the evidence was incontrovertible. The community's trusted protector of nature was unmasked as a predator of the most insidious kind. As the sun crested the horizon, painting the valley in hues of gold and rose, McKenna and Shaw stood by, watching as the pieces of the puzzle they had painstakingly assembled were set into motion. The truth was out, and Emily's voice, silenced for so long, was finally being heard. But even as justice loomed, questions remained. How had Oliver hidden his true nature for so long? What had driven him to such darkness? The answers lay ahead, in the confessions soon to follow, and McKenna and Shaw knew their journey was not yet over. As they prepared for the next steps, a sense of solemn triumph filled the air. They had come closer than ever to understanding the depths of human nature, the duality of light and shadow that defined even the most familiar faces. And they were ready to see this through to the end, to ensure that Emily's story, and the stories of others like her, would never be forgotten. In the stark, fluorescent-lit confines of the interrogation room, Oliver sat, his once composed demeanor shattered, replaced by a brittle defiance. The room was silent save for the rhythmic ticking of the wall clock, each tick a reminder of time slipping away, of the inevitability of truth. McKenna and Shaw entered, their expressions a mix of determination and empathy. They knew this moment was pivotal, that the weight of years of silence and unanswered questions rested heavily on their shoulders. They had to coax the truth from Oliver, to unravel the tangled web of deceit that had ensnared him for over a decade. Oliver, his eyes darting nervously, tried to maintain a facade of innocence. But as McKenna laid out the evidence, a painstaking narrative of digital footprints, DNA matches, and eyewitness testimony, his defenses began to crumble. The veneer of denial cracked, revealing glimpses of the tormented soul beneath. For hours they pressed, their questions probing the fissures in Oliver's armor. What had happened on that fateful day 12 years ago? Why had Emily, a vibrant young woman with a passion for life, been taken from the world so brutally? Finally, as the sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the room, Oliver's resolve broke. His confession was halting, mired in justifications and self-pity, but it was a confession nonetheless. He spoke of an argument, a moment of rage that spiraled out of control. Emily had confronted him about his unethical practices, threatening to expose him. In a panic he had lashed out, silencing her voice forever. The truth, bitter and raw, hung in the air, a testament to the darkness that had lingered beneath the surface for so long. McKenna and Shaw listened, their hearts heavy with the knowledge that justice, though delayed, was finally within reach. In the weeks that followed, the legal machinery moved swiftly. The trial was a spectacle, the courtroom filled with a community seeking closure, a family desperate for justice. Oliver's guilt was undeniable, his sentence life without parole, a fitting end for a man who had taken so much. Yet, even as the gavel fell and the courtroom emptied, the impact of Emily's loss lingered. Her family, though grateful for the resolution, knew that no verdict could fill the void left by her absence. They spoke of her often, their memories a tapestry of love and laughter, ensuring that her spirit would endure. In Monument Valley, the community grappled with the duality of Oliver's legacy. A man once revered for his conservation efforts was now reviled for his betrayal. But there was a collective understanding that vigilance and empathy must prevail, that true justice lies not only in punishment, but in the lessons learned. As McKenna and Shaw stood on the windswept plateau, overlooking the vast expanse of red rock and endless sky, they reflected on their journey. They had unraveled a mystery, brought a hidden truth to light, and in doing so, honored Emily's memory. It was a reminder that justice, though sometimes elusive, is a pursuit worth undertaking, a beacon in the darkness. And as they turned to leave, the sun setting behind them in a blaze of color, they carried with them the knowledge that Emily's story, and the stories of others lost to time, would never truly be forgotten.